Welcome to the Universal Inclusion Podcast, where we spotlight the voices shaping a more diverse and inclusive future in space. In each episode, we bring you stories from trailblazers across the industry, from engineers and entrepreneurs to activists and artists, all breaking barriers in their own way. So, if you're ready to get inspired, let's dive in. Hello, Maynard, and welcome to the podcast.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
So tell us, what initially drew you to science communication and outreach?
Yeah, so I gotta have a crazy non-traditional story into getting to the work that I do now. I didn't really come into this with a goal of doing STEM education or outreach. That wasn't really my intended mission. I kind of fell into this lane of science communication work. My background is in the STEM fields. I have a background in civil and environmental engineering and worked as an engineer, worked in the industry for a number of years. But then I did a complete 180, left industry, and went into entertainment. So music and acting had always been a big passion of mine. And I never really had a chance to do that full time while I was obviously working as an engineer. And so I wanted to shoot my shot at my creative endeavors. And so I took a leap of faith and moved down to LA to pursue some opportunities on the entertainment side. And in the midst of doing that, I started getting into some kind of creative content. And I always still had a love for science and giving back to science and wanting to spark curiosity in science, because I was just always a science nerd at heart. And I ended up doing some fun comedic sketches around this character that was true to me, who was just this quirky scientist that was always, into music and entertainment, would drop random science facts in like weird, inappropriate situations. And it kind of evolved into this whole hip hop science platform. And initially, that wasn't really my goal, my perspective. But I realized that people were learning from the work that I was putting out there. They were learning from the video content that I was making. And I realized this had a really unique reach that can be able to not only help students, but help young working professionals, adults, businesses alike really draw an affinity for science and kind of spark interest and curiosity into where the science fields could take you. And I always kind of hark back to how I wish I had been taught science when I was growing up, right? When I was a student, I wish my teachers had made it fun and entertaining and engaging. So I realized there was an opportunity here to really be able to reach a specific demographic of students, particularly students of color. And so I created, my mission became, encouraging more minority and youth involvement into the STEM fields. And really when I identified that mission as part of the work that I was doing, that's when kind of everything opened up. And I was really able to kind of focus in on my lane, really being able to showcase the fun side of science, but then also be able to talk about diversity in STEM, the importance of representation in STEM, and all these other elements just kind of evolved from that. And now that's part of the work that I do, is obviously in STEM outreach, educating and empowering the next generation, sparking curiosity in science, and doing a lot of work for educators as well too, to showcase how they can reach out to their students and education system in general, how that could be improved to be able to help support students of color and underrepresented youth as well. And so that's kind of how everything evolved into the whole STEM outreach platform with the hip hop science work that I do now.
Wow, thank you for sharing your story. And I find it so interesting that, it was digging into your passions and being open to the duality of having different interests and kind of taking the leap. I think, when I worked as a teacher, I saw so many kids as early as kindergarten freaking out. Am I going to be a teacher or a scientist or an artist? And I'm like, you can do it all.
Yeah. Yep, 100%. And that's a very common thing for students. And I felt in that bubble as well, too, especially as someone that was really big into entertainment growing up, but also loving science. I always felt like I had to be one or the other. There was never any perspective of duality. And I know for a lot of students that pushes them away from education because they feel they can't express themselves creatively, or that there's no opportunity for them to be able to showcase their artistic side in science. And really that's part of the work that I try to do now in my hip hop science platform, is showcase that you can be versatile, you can be multifaceted, you can have interests in fashion and design and sports and entertainment and still have a love for science and really be able to fuse all of these fields together. I think it's really important, especially for students early on, to be able to see that duality and be able to know that they can be multiple different things and they can have interests in different areas and even contrasting areas that may seem different or may seem kind of out the box, that there's science elements in everything and you can pull science out of all of these different fields. And so I think that duality is really, really important to stress, especially for our youth.
Exactly. Exactly. And, it's going to lend itself to whatever lane you end up in. I mean, especially art. I think that's been so undervalued, underfunded, underemphasized. And I think that the creativity that comes from being in art, just being, you don't have to call yourself an artist, but being open to and fluid in lots of different art forms, it opens yourself up to creativity that's going to lend itself in whatever you're doing.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And that's a big kind of misconception too, that like scientists aren't artists or scientists aren't creative thinkers. If you look at every scientist that's made any amazing discovery or doing incredible work in their field, there's artistic elements and creative elements in every single thing that they do. It takes creativity to be a scientist and come up with new innovations and new technology. Like that's the most creative field you could possibly think of, is being a scientist and developing new technology that's going to send us into the future. And the artistic side is just as important too. Every artist, or I mean every scientist that I know, has some sort of artistic background, whether it's drawing, whether it's music. There's something that's artistic in their wheelhouse that I think roots them and is their foundational element to helping them become better scientists.
Absolutely. We often talk about this openness to fail and how scared kids are and adults are of failure. And
Yeah.
then taking that leap, it's like they're terrified. But what I find whenever I'm doing art, especially if I'm learning something new, so I'm big into, I love to sew, I love to make my own clothes, I dabble in leather working, I've made some shoes, which, like,
Oh, okay.
let's be real. These are not hitting any sort of fashion show, but they work. They work for the
Yeah.
purpose. But
Okay.
it's
I have to
it's
say, I have to check out your shoe collection.
oh wow, dropping like 2032 because it's a long road, okay? But what I love in it is that you really open yourself up to like, I'm gonna really suck at this and I'm gonna have fun. And
Yeah.
that's okay because like 5, 10 years down the road, I might get really good at this or I might not. Like it's just you're just so open when you're into the arts to discovery.
Yeah, yep, that's true. That's true. And I think that's an area of my life too that I kind of learned early on, is that you just accept failure. Failure is part of the discovery process, and you need to fail in order to be able to grow. And yeah, you're right. I think so many people are scared to fail, so it limits them from trying new things, or limits them from thinking outside the box, or taking risks, or transitioning into a different field, or adding into their wheelhouse of things that they love to do because they don't want to fail at something. But if you don't fail, then you don't have any ability to grow and be able to learn and be able to make adjustments and get better. And I think I know personally for me, every failure that I've ever had, quote unquote failure that I've had, was really just a learning moment. It helped me progress. It helped me kind of understand my new trajectory of what I need to do, or what route I need to go, or what things I need to improve on. And so for me, like I love those opportunities because they fuel growth. And I think we need to be okay with that. We need to kind of put a new twist. We don't shouldn't even call it failure, right? We should just call it, part of the process. It's with everybody in every field, in every endeavor that you're doing. Like you need to have that failure in order to be able to progress.
Exactly. Let's
Mhm.
dive into the hip hop aspect of it because I'm really interested in talking about code switching with you. So, for
Yeah.
those who are listening who are unfamiliar, code switching is when you adjust your self presentation or self expression to receive desirable outcomes, through mirroring norms, behaviors, attributes of the dominant group. So this will be in specific context. So lots of people will, modify their vernacular or slang and take away parts of themselves to fit into the mainstream so that they don't get discriminated against or to try and curb bias, right? And one of the big
Mhm.
things is hip hop and hip hop music. So what I love is that you are a role model saying like, yes, I am in the sciences. I
Mhm.
am also a hip hop artist and I can be these two things and I don't have to hide this and keep this hidden away. And I think that's a big, big, big thing for kids of color.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And it's crazy, right? When you think about code switching, like you said, many people may not be familiar with it because predominantly it resides within a particular demographic, and it tends to be people of color that code switch. Obviously, there's code switching in different elements from different people from different backgrounds and genders as well too. But I relate to it because this is something that's fundamental to my upbringing, and I think people of color can unanimously come together to understand, like, hey, this is something that we intrinsically do in a way, because this is the atmosphere and the world that we live in, right? We understand that we live in a world where racism exists. We live in a world where discrimination exists. And as a Black person, I can't hide my color, right? I can't wake up in the morning and go out somewhere and not be a Black man in society, right? Like, that is who I am. I can't shade that or shelter that. And so I walk in a different type of purpose when I'm outside. I walk in a different type of purpose when I'm interacting with other people from different backgrounds and within my own community as well too. And so fundamentally, code switching is something that's always been rooted in what I do, because I understand that I can't be the same dynamic as I can be in other circles. And I think as someone that's gone into the STEM fields, and I can kind of harp back to my kind of educational journey, and especially getting into the professional fields. As someone that grew up as a hip hop artist and dressed a certain way and looked a certain way and spoke a certain way, I understood that when I got into my professional environment, when I'm, at my desk, working with other engineers and putting together designs and speaking with architects about, this new infrastructure building that we're going to put up, there's a certain way I have to be able to speak to them that I wouldn't be able to speak to my friends that I'm talking to at the bar or the club after work, right? I think we just kind of naturally know that. And so there was always that adjustment of kind of my culture and kind of my self-awareness. And I know for me, it was something that I was just kind of rooted in, and I just did it naturally. I didn't necessarily have to be taught how to do it. And I think a lot of people of color don't necessarily have to be taught how to do that. But we are in an interesting lane right now, especially with the new generation of, self-expression being really at the key and kind of at the forefront, and really kind of being able to be themselves and uniquely themselves. I think this next generation has a different type of angle than even my generation coming into the workforce. There's kind of an understanding and kind of a realism of, like, I want to be true to who I am and be authentic in whatever lane that I'm in, right? And so it was funny. I actually just did a video a few days back because there was this post about this teacher that banned a number of slang words in her classroom, right? And it went viral. And somebody had shown, like, the letter of all the words that she banned, and it was very common vernacular that a lot of Gen Z would use. No cap, mood, low key, high key, on God, like things that our community knows as slang. She had banned them, or I don't know if it was the gender, but the teacher had banned it in the classroom. And for me, it really harped on a lot of the things that I try to focus on my platform, my hip hop science platform, because everything is about this merger of entertainment, music, and art, and really using these as tools to be able to educate. And I know when it comes to slang, that's an area that I think is really important because, one, teachers are doing a number of things in the classroom, right? Obviously, you're trying to educate your youth, but you want to be able to connect with students. You want to be able to bring them in to this education field. And if we can't connect with them emotionally, if we can't meet students where they are, we tend to push the students away. And so many students have been lost in the cracks and left behind because they don't feel education speaks to them, or they don't feel like their educators speak to them or know who they are or want to connect with them or let their self-expression shine. And I think it's really important because there's a fusion. Obviously, you have to be able to teach them the appropriate language and set them up for success in their professional environments. But there's a way to be able to let their self-expression still shine while showcasing kind of the proper educational tools. And so for me, I always try to find a way to twist things uniquely. And that's really kind of the crux of the Hip Hop Science platform, is how do we kind of twist and reshape our kind of traditional educational process and be able to find new ways of being able to connect people with science that still lets them be authentic and still keeps them rooted in things that they know and understand and can connect with, And hip hop for me was that tool, being able to infuse whether it's, hip hop vernacular or hip hop references or pop culture references, to be able to showcase that science speaks to you and science is part of your everyday life. And when students kind of see that representation, they're able to connect with it and they're able to build a different level of affinity with science than they would otherwise. And so for me, I thought it was really important to be able to allow students to be able to let their self-expression showcase and let their self-expression flourish in these educational environments and not strip them of their identity, not strip them of their kind of self-awareness and their authenticity, but instead use those as tools to help bring them in, help capture them and spark their curiosity. And then from there, you can now help those other educational tools as far as proper vernacular and setting them up for success in professional environments. You can let those opportunities really flourish because now you've built a connection with the students. And students are much smarter than we give them credit for. They'll understand that they need to speak in certain vernacular, in certain situations, in certain environments. They understand that, but they also want to be rooted in their own self-identity and self-awareness of who they are. And so you think about all these elements when we talk about code switching and transforming and switching into different lanes and kind of adjusting your personality. There's a way to be able to do it uniquely. There's a way for educators to be able to showcase to students that they can do it uniquely. And I think it's up to us to kind of highlight all these elements that we have to kind of change and conform to when we talk about kind of traditional academic and societal norms as well too. And code switching falls right within that lane as well. And so to me, that's definitely an important aspect to highlight. And I think particularly with this next generation, that's an incredibly important area that we have to really do a better job at reinforcing.
Absolutely. And, you touched on that it is very nuanced and that a lot of this is taught indirectly to kids. And us being role
Mhm.
models is a huge element of it. So I look back and, in preparation too for this podcast, knowing that I wanted to speak about this, I was really thinking back to all the times. And being biracial, there were times that I was taught explicitly to pass for white, and if I could, to do it.
Yeah.
And, I think it's a unique position because, as you said, lots of people, they can't take off or remove certain elements that are going to cause them, potentially to experience bias, to experience racism. And so
Mhm.
for me growing up, I think a lot of it was, certain elements. Even I was thinking back to a time when I took on a contract to teach in China for 2 years.
Okay.
And I was doing my rounds of I've got family that live all over the place, and my dad's side of the family is Somali. And so Somalis love to move. And so we've got family all over the place. And I was visiting
Yeah.
an uncle and we were talking about it. And he said to me, "Do they know you're Somali?" And I said, "No.
Mhm.
It's not on the resume." But
Yeah.
inevitably, I wouldn't hide that. And he said, "I think you should. I think you
Mm.
should because, we don't know if it's safe. We don't know. You're
Mhm.
going so far away. There's no family there and you're under contract." And all of this was like so true because I was, jumping into a big unknown. And that
Yeah.
conversation hit me a little bit like I was offended, but then I was like, but you're right. Because what we don't talk about in all of this, in this code switching, is that we're looking to set people up for safety.
Yeah. Mhm.
And so
Yeah. That's
there is this part of we're trying not to strip identity, but I think that the older generations are just really scared about what we might encounter. And that's really at the crux of this. And so I think that by showing role models that are multidimensional and are keeping their identity intact. And okay, yes, we all agree that we've got academic language, yada yada, doesn't mean that
yeah.
at the door you have to drop elements of yourself.
Yeah. That's true. That's true. Did you find that as a consistent challenge for you growing up, like finding lanes where you didn't want to share your Somali side with others and depending on what environments that you were in?
Yeah, you know what? I was always a little bit of a social scientist. And
Mm.
during university, I worked in Shoppers Drug Mart, which is the US equivalent of like maybe a CVS, perhaps,
Okay.
in
Yeah.
cosmetics. And
Okay.
so I was hit a lot by these introductions all the time, all the time. And I did a
Mhm.
little experiment where I didn't wear my name tag because I also refused to, because that always opened the door of, oh, what's your name? Where's it from? Where are you from? And that always just like, why? I'm literally begging your lipstick. What does it matter? But people would always ask me because they wanted to kind of put me in a box. And sometimes I pass, sometimes I don't. And I did a little experiment where I lied and I said, "Oh, I'm from Mexico." And I had just lived in Mexico and I was speaking Spanish, and so I wanted to see people's
Yeah.
reaction. And there were no follow-ups usually, and it was met with like a, "Oh, awesome. Oh, okay."
Hmm.
Literally the easiest interaction. And then I would say,
Yeah.
"Oh, I'm actually biracial. My mom is English German and my dad is Somali." And the look on
Hmm.
people's faces always there was like a, "Huh? Can't figure that
Yeah.
out." And then there were
Hmm.
always follow-ups or political commentary, which I'm like,
Mm.
okay, you saw Black Hawk Down, kudos. But I
Yeah.
don't want to get into this with a stranger. So,
Yeah.
I went down that road for a bit long enough to see, okay, different people will have different experiences, but ultimately, I don't want to shy away from who I am and my background. And I think what really helped was when I got to really know my Somali family and I ended up living in East
Yeah.
Africa with them. And then from there on, I'm like, I cannot, when this is brought up, I cannot deny that part. I don't want to. And I'm incredibly proud and I'll face whatever bias head on.
Hmm. Yeah, that's great. It's funny. I have kind of very similar story. You kind of a unique aspect as well because my family is West African. So my mom's side is from Cameroon and my dad's side is from Nigeria. And I was born in the States. I only was in Texas for like a couple months, and my parents were still going to school. So they actually sent me to Cameroon, and my aunt raised me in Cameroon for the first 5 years of my life, right? And so I was very rooted in my African upbringing, particularly my Cameroonian upbringing. So I came back to the States when I was about 5, 6 years old. And, English was not my first language. And I grew up in a very predominantly white area in Vancouver, Washington. Right, pretty much all white high school. Only like one of like five black people in a huge high school and everything, and so I was always kind of in this weird dynamic of being really rooted in my African roots, but then coming back to the States and being naturally deemed as just African American, because even within there's and you kind of know this as well too, right? There's nuances between Africans and African Americans. There's, they're balancing that struggle as well too. It's a whole nother dynamic that a lot of people that are maybe outside of the community don't understand. And so even in many circles, having to come and even justify my African roots, right, to people that are like, oh, you grew up in West Africa. Oh, okay. There's new dialogue and a new dimension of connection too that comes with that when people know that you've actually lived back home and spent time back home and your roots are back there as well. And I think that's great. I think that's really dope that you're able to spend some time in East Africa because I think there's no better opportunity to get connected with your roots than obviously being immersed in the culture. There's a different dynamic and a different appreciation that you have for that. And for me, I think being able to spend my early years there and then obviously being able to go back multiple times and having a lot of family that still lives overseas, that's really helped shape my perspective, my dynamic, because I'm able to see kind of 360 on all
Mhm.
layers. I'm able to see kind of this global international dynamic when it comes to racism and discrimination and inclusion. I'm able to see a lot of the social dynamic that occurs here within the States, within African Americans, and having this kind of full understanding has definitely enlightened me in a different perspective. And I play the same games too. I always love doing kind of social dynamics and kind of playing different roles and seeing how people react in different circles to them knowing that you have a specific background or upbringing. For me, I think that's always cool, and that's really helped shape a lot of the dynamics of the work that I do too. So that's a really awesome story. I'm glad you shared that.
This is why I love and I wanted to create this podcast because there'll be people listening who will just like get our stories and be like, yes, absolutely. Having,
Yeah.
understanding of the different cultures and like how your identity shifts,
Mhm.
where you're situated. And then there'll be folks that are like, never would have thought.
Yeah.
Had no idea. And so
Mhm.
this is for both, but thinking about it too, I always think to folks as I'm educating in DEI, like there's a lot behind if let's use Narnia, open the closet, walk through. We've got a lot going on, a lot of nuances, a lot of background. And what's really cool and interesting is everyone's going to have a different perspective, different experience based on their culture, based on when they left the country or went back, their
Yeah.
family dynamics. And so all of this is moving and shifting. But the one thing that's going to stay the same, the one constant in all of this is the built-in systemic injustice that all of us kind of come up to.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. That's 100%. Yep. There's that element is, especially now in the times that we're in, is very interesting because we grow up obviously being immersed in our cultures, being immersed in kind of who we are, and in understanding that racism and discrimination exists. We navigate it in a certain way, and for me, even especially right now, looking at the dynamic of the world and politically, the fact that issues around diversity and inclusion and equity have become political issues is just mind blowing because it's never been about politics. But obviously, we're in a day and age now where I think we're finding ways to politicize everything because it's the easiest way to become divisive. It's the easiest way to be able to say, oh, this is right and this is wrong, because politics have become so divisive. And so now that we attach politicism to these social dynamics, it now puts it in a position where, oh, we can get rid of this, or we can keep this, or add this as we feel free. And diversity and equity and inclusion, when we talk about DEI, it goes back to what we talked about earlier when about code switching. Is like, I can't wake up and not be a Black man in America, right?
Mhm.
And you can't wake up and not be a woman in America, in the world. You can't wake up and not be biracial. Like, these dynamics are fundamental to who we are. And when we think about diversity and inclusion, especially I look at my college pathway, and I was someone that did extremely well in growing up from elementary school through high school, getting into college. Valedictorian, perfect GPA, honor roll, doing advanced courses, captain of track team, like credentials upon like credentials, right? And it's because I grew up with African parents, right? There's all that education was always definitely reinforced. It's like, you're gonna be a doctor, lawyer, engineer, right? Like that was the mentality of, and I think immigrants, first generation particularly, will understand that dynamic as well too, because our parents left where they were to come to the States to be able to, one, have freedom, to be able to have opportunities to excel. And their goal first and foremost was, how do we now provide a better life for our children? And so that was my parents' priority, is like, how do we set them up for success, to be able to have opportunities and access to things that we didn't have the means of having, which I appreciate a lot more now as an adult than I did probably growing up. But you think about that now when we come to diversity. I went to school at the University of Washington on a scholarship from Costco. Everybody's familiar with Costco, the huge global store chain. But I was under the diversity and enhancement scholarship from Costco. That was the only way that I was able to get an academic scholarship to the University of Washington. With all my, academic credentials, with all these other things that I'd done all throughout high school, I still had to get support and aid in order to be able to get into college, and that was me having all those credentials. And you don't think about everybody, other students that may have not had similar, but were still on a very high level. There's reasons why we have things like diversity and inclusion, and when we and as formats and programs around DEI, is because we know we live in a racist society. We know we live in a society where discrimination is prevalent. And, you always talk about the good old boys club and people bringing in people from their own circles, or people that bring in people from their communities that look like them. There's a reason why these initiatives are put in place, is simply so that people that have the skills and have the ability can be put in positions where they can be seen. That's
Yeah.
simply what it is, you know, and it's been twisted and molded into this issue of, oh, we're just giving people that don't have any skill sets or people that don't have any credentials, we're just giving them an alley hoop, and we're just letting them come into the door without, you know, being actually versed in the skill set that they need to have. And that's not the case. You know, we know at the core, maybe not everybody knows, but really innovation, new technology, things that are taking us into the new frontier are only fueled by diversity and only fueled by being able to have people from different backgrounds in the room. Every innovation that you can think of that's helped society at some point, right, are fueled by being able to have diverse voices in the room, diverse perspectives, because diversity isn't just about color of your skin. Diversity brings in new ways of thinking. It brings in being able to think outside the box. It brings being able to bring new problems, new dimensions to the table, that if you just have a circle of people that look like you and have been through the same traditional pathway towards education as you, have been faced with the same circumstances in life as you're not really thinking globally from a perspective of how can we really do things that help change and reshape the world. But when you're able to bring people that have different voices, different cultural dynamics, different backgrounds, different perspectives, have been shaped and molded from different unique upbringings, that's how you're able now to fuel so much innovation. You're able to create new ways of thinking. You're able to solve new problems, and you're able to reach a whole new dynamic of people, is by having diverse roots and really being able to showcase diversity as a fundamental foundation of whatever program or whatever business or corporation that you're starting. It's really rooted in being able to have diverse voices at the table. And I think we've really lost sight of that. And for me, it's really a shame that this issue has become politicized,
It
and
is.
that companies are pulling out of funding and all sorts of things because they don't want to be seen as supporting DEI, when we all know that that was never the case, that this was all about being able to provide opportunities for people that were well credited and knowledgeable in the work that they do, that would never have otherwise had that opportunity because they won't be traditionally seen because of systemic racism and systemic discrimination that exists in our society.
Yeah, exactly. You touched on so many points. I really want to hone in on this, idea of DEI being basically at bat or in opposition to anything that's merit based, because I think that is a real concern that that's being brought up, because it's not, like you said, it's about being seen. Okay. And for folks, we said that, this podcast, it's folks that really understand and have a similar background and are facing these barriers, and folks that may have never been, might not come from a community that's faced barriers. And it's that group that isn't quite getting that you just might experience your resume or your application because of your name being taken to the side, right? And then that in of itself, everything you've done up to that, it's a no-go, okay? You might hit that interview, okay? You might have gotten through that stage, then hit that interview, just how you're seen phenotypically. No, you don't seem like you fit the bill. Or maybe there's some
Yeah.
cross-cultural communication things. And so you might just come from a community that hasn't had this back and forth banter that the interviewer expects, and so you're not made of the right stuff. There's just so many little barriers that add up to you just not getting a shot, period.
Yeah.
So these DEI initiatives, they help you get through the door. You would, if everything was equal, you'd have the same shot as everyone, but that's not the reality that we live in. And so
Mhm.
this is not just looking at it and acknowledging it, because there's so much gaslighting of like, get another degree, get another qualification. No, you're good enough. You just hit a
Mhm.
invisible systemic barrier. But this
Mhm.
gets you through the door. This gets you the chance, and it acknowledges it, and it helps you to go to the step that you should have gotten to. So it's not in the face of merit based. You have the merit. It's just helping you through the system that's unfair.
Yeah, absolutely. And you hit it right on the head. It's like there's just been this narrative that we're all playing off an equal playing field, and and we're not. That's where the problem lies at the end of the day, is that we are not playing on on an even playing field, and we haven't been for a long time. From racial perspective, from the gender perspective, so many different elements set us on different paths, and really that's the whole goal around DEI, is to actually put everybody on an equal playing field, so everybody that has the merit can be looked at equally and can be given the same opportunities. And it's definitely unfortunate in this stage. And for me, like, part of the work that I do, obviously, with my platform is, when I won't say part of the work, the majority of the work that I do, because I emphasize myself as, Black male scientist, which, we are, gravely underrepresented in the STEM fields. Representing myself as that is part of the work that I do in inspiring the next generation, because I don't want to be known as the only Black male scientist or science communicator doing this work. I want others to be inspired, and I want others to have the opportunity and have the curiosity to be able to do this work, especially when it comes to our youth. And when we talk about these issues around, diversity, we're seeing so much representation not be seen, to where students are being pushed away from education and not being inspired to continue to pursue higher education. And what it ultimately does is it creates this cycle of of these unequal playing fields and lack of access. And we're going to continue having this same dynamic. We're going to continue having the same story for the next generation to come, unless we make that change, unless we do things to reinforce diversity, unless we do things to get more representation in the workforce, get more representation in leadership roles when we're talking about corporations, to be able to now create a pipeline where we can get more people from diverse voices and diverse backgrounds into leadership roles in major corporations and all other levels. When we talk about hiring processes and being able to empower the next workforce, we got to get diversity in that area, because that's how we're going to be able to now bring more representation into the field and be able to uplift those communities that aren't seen in these spaces. And so it's a whole cyclical dynamic, and there's obviously so many other layers around it that we can get into for for hours. But fundamentally, at the core, at the root of it all, diversity is key to our growth, and is key to everyone's growth, not just for us living in these diverse cultures and these backgrounds, but society as a whole, to be able to uplift the next generation, to be able to uplift our technologies, to be able to uplift different things that we're going to be able to do to reshape the world. It's important that we understand that, and we keep diversity rooted as a fundamental element of who we are and what we're going to do to help reshape society.
Exactly. As you said as well, it's not just what the next generation needs and deserves is having this equity. But, I think that industries that weigh so heavily on STEAM and STEM, like aerospace, will see that having the diversity in the room, as you spoke to earlier, that diversity of thought will get you to where you want to go faster. And I think people forget that. They get a little bit threatened by it, or maybe think it's going to be a lot of work having diverse perspectives. It's not, trust me. And once we get more diversity in leadership, in, different walks of life, then I think it'll just be this like, oh my gosh, why? Of course, why wouldn't we do this? Why would we be holding ourselves, I don't want to say holding ourselves back, but I mean, kind of. Like, you have a
Yeah.
superpower here. You have folks that are able to offer you multidimensional thought based on multidimensional experience. That is like, why wouldn't you want to use everything at your disposal, especially when the end goal is getting off planet? The end goal is
Yeah.
safely inhabiting spaces outside of Earth. Like, why wouldn't we leverage absolutely everything we have?
Yep. That's the only way that we're going to be able to do it. Like, there's no future for us outside of this planet. There's no future for us when it comes to space exploration and being able to create new habitats on other worlds, unless we can think outside the box and be diverse in our frame of thinking and diverse in our perspectives, and being able to bring people from different cultures and different backgrounds, because that's fundamental to our elevation. That's fundamental to being able to understand a whole new social dynamic when we're going to another planet and doing these enormous technological feats and accomplishing these technological feats. And so it's really rooted within all that. And I think the more that we can kind of reclaim this narrative, and I'm glad that we're having the discussion, because part of what we have to do within our communities is reinforce and reclaim this narrative bring people back to the what the fundamental understanding of DEI is. I'm always happy when I see businesses or corporations that are saying, hey, this is still important to us, we're going to reinforce this. And it has to start on the higher levels, right? And to be able to have this trickle down effect. And it's really unfortunate. I had a program that I'm involved in actually coming up next week. It's a national STEM festival, and there's this big competition all throughout the United States where students were able to submit videos, some area of science that fascinates them, and create a quick little short snippet. And from there, we were able to select a group of finalists to be able to compete at this national STEM festival. And I'm a brand ambassador for the festival, so I'll be there as a mentor, working with some of the finalists and kind of showcasing and sharing my story and kind of being part of that selection process of choosing the finalists for this. But we had this whole huge campaign, got all sorts of corporations and corporate backing. And literally just last week, had a number of sponsors pull out because they felt that part of this festival, which part of it is to be able to find ways to be able to include more diverse voices and people from diverse backgrounds, and obviously have an equitable space where youth can be able to feel empowered and be able to share their knowledge and bring their understanding to the table. And so we had a number of corporations pull out their funding. And you think about it, this is a program set up for our youth. We have hundreds of students coming in from all across the US that have worked hard, that are qualified, that have a love for science and are passionate about what they do, all coming to be celebrated and to be able to help share their knowledge. And you have corporations that are basically throwing these kids to the wayside because they don't want to be seen as supporting DEI, or they're fearful about backlash that they may receive from whoever their political, backing, or other pundits that may be, supporting them in other aspects. They left these students, essentially just left them hanging. And it's really unfortunate to see, because I've been seeing very similar stories in other circles. And at the end of the day, the ones that are getting affected are the students. They're the ones that are getting affected because they're going to come now to this event in DC, and they're not going to have the financial means, the financial support, and the financial backing that they're going to initially have. They're going to lose out on opportunities on a whole nother scale that we were able to provide for them that we may not be able to provide because we're not getting the same type of funding. And so you're hurting the next generation. You're hurting the future workforce, and you're putting these kids in now a dire situation. And so you think about it from that perspective. Yeah, it's easy to say, "Oh, I'm going to pull out because we don't want to do this," or we're fear based. But now, who is it that you're affecting? And we're seeing this happen firsthand. And ultimately, the ones that get affected are youth. And we should be doing everything that we can in our power to uplift our youth and provide them with opportunities to excel, not disparaging them or putting them in a hole because we are fearful or we've lost sight of what's important in society.
And the message is truly loud and clear. And it's really hard, if you've worked with kids, they pick up on all of this stuff. Okay. Even if they
Yeah.
aren't going, and if they weren't earmarked and now they can't go, they were just someone who's like following on social media, or, it's a friend of a friend who's going and this is their story. It ripples out to the whole community. And the message is stop. We're
Hmm.
scared. And also, you're really disposable. We can change our mind about these really huge blocks within your life. When we're looking
Hmm.
at the cutbacks that are coming in the States, inclusive education supports, all kinds of healthcare supports, you name it. And the message is, sorry, we can pull this. We can pull this safety, we can pull this security, we can pull this future right out from under you.
Yep. Yep. And yeah, and you're right. Kids see that. Kids understand that, and we think that it's above them, or that this is working on higher scales. But ultimately, it has a trickle down effect, and we see and students, one, they'll see that, and you have minority students now who are going to be further discouraged from pursuing higher education. And then you have non-minority students that see that and then believe like, hey, if these companies and other people don't prioritize this, so why do I need to prioritize it? And so they grow up not having an awareness about the importance of diversity as well. And so it works on both sides to where you're now inhibiting these students' success, but then you're also now reinforcing a mindset of exclusiveness that now is going to continue to foster when these students get into higher learning and higher education or into the professional environment as well. And so it affects everything on both sides, and it's definitely sad to see. And so unfortunately now we're in a stage, yes, we have to reclaim the narrative. We have to
Hmm.
kind of buy it back in a way, but it's going to take people outside of our community. It's going to take it on a much larger scale to be able to reinforce and really be able to bring back this narrative and showcase the importance of it. And hopefully we get in the position where all our voices are going to be loud and clear. And, I think socially we understand that kind of things are always on a wave, right? We go through ups and downs, through societal changes. And hopefully right now we're on a down, but I'm optimistic that we'll be on that curve again to be able to reshape and really be able to reclaim that narrative and get that fundamental understanding of why it's important.
Reclaiming the narrative is the most important thing. And it's something that we can do without putting a lot of financial backing. Do you know what I'm saying? Because I would love to say, okay, let's, gather around and support all of these different initiatives, but the funding cuts are monstrous. And so that would,
Yeah.
also be a strain on community. But I think in taking back the narrative and reshaping, I think that's something we can really easily do. I think by uplifting folks that are already mentors, such as yourself, I really encourage folks, from minority groups who are in STEAM and STEM. Think about it. Think about going back to your high school. Think about maybe like doing a little, lunch and learn, or maybe if you don't feel comfortable doing a whole, school auditorium speech, which is scary for a lot of folks. Maybe it's
Yeah.
just, hooking up with a group of kids and mentoring them. It can look like a lot of different things, but just making your presence a little bit more known, I think is gonna make a really big change.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and we're in that tipping point now where we're gonna realize it, and like I said, everything's cyclical. But I'm optimistic that people are making their voices heard. There was a recently, I forget the name of it. It was actually a big national event around science and kind of around the narrative of science. And there are protests and there are people showcasing, hey, why do we need to have trust in science? Being able to uplift scientists' voices, and all these kind of different things are going to be key in helping to reclaim that narrative. They're going to be key in helping us bring back this understanding of what's important when it comes to obviously things around social justice, but obviously around scientific understanding and commitment to science and a trust in science as well. I think these are all going to partner in a unique way to really kind of help us reshape and retool to be able to get us in a position where we can uplift each other and uplift these areas of society that were now kind of been, taken away. And so, yeah, I'm optimistic that we're on that curve.
I'm optimistic too, and it definitely is a pendulum. It's just sad to see it on this side of things. So, we appreciate everything that you're doing, and thank you so much for sharing your experience and perspective on the podcast.
Yeah, no, thank you. This was great. This is great. I think like we said, these discussions are important. It's important that people hear the discussions that are being had and partake in it, like find ways to be able to have these type of social interactions in your own communities, whether they are people that are within your own circle that look like you, or hopefully people from outside your circles. I think being able to have these conversations in multiple facets is really important. And that's going to be key for us to be able to expand and be able to change perspectives, is to be able to have these sometimes tough conversations, but important conversations within our communities and outside of them as well.
Exactly. Yeah, we're not shying away, and we hope that folks will have these hard conversations, be open, be okay with learning something totally new even if it's a little bit scary, and also dig in as things are coming across the news. Dig in and see the other side of the coin, see other people's experiences, and not just take it, especially when it's trying to dismantle something that really affects people's lives.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So thank you for the work that you're doing. This is awesome to have this opportunity and to be able to reinforce this as an important narrative, an important topic to be had. And so hopefully we inspired some people that may be watching to really reshift kind of their perspective or be able to find ways to help bring this conversation to the forefront.
Exactly. All right. Well, thank you, Maynard. Thank you for listening to the Universal Inclusion Podcast. If you're interested in learning more about how to get involved in the space industry, follow us on Instagram and TikTok at universal_inclusion. Our passion is amplifying voices in STEAM, STEM, and the space industry. If you'd like to be a guest, shoot us a DM. And until next time, ad Astra.